Every day they pass me by. I can see it in their eyes. Empty people filled with care, headed who knows where. On they go through private pain, living fear to fear. Laughter hides their silent cries. Only Jesus heals. People need the Lord. People need the Lord. At the end of broken dreams, here's the open door. People need the Lord. People need the Lord. When will we realize people need the Lord? We are called to take His light to a world where wrong seems right. What could be too great a cause for sharing life with one who's lost? Through His love our hearts can feel all the grief they bear. They must hear the words of life only we can share. People need the Lord. People need the Lord. At the end of broken dreams, He's the open door. People need the Lord. People need the Lord. When will we realize that we must give all our hearts? For people need the Lord. For people need the Lord. Hello friends, and welcome to the second segment on our sharings with the theme, Fear Ye Not, Murals of Hope from the Bible. And our reading or sharing this day comes from Mark chapter 5 and verse 36. Mark chapter 5 and verse 36, the Bible says, "As soon as Jesus heard the word that was spoken, he said to the ruler of the synagogue, 'Do not be afraid, only believe.'" I read again. "As soon as Jesus heard the word that was spoken, he said to the ruler of the synagogue, 'Do not be afraid, only believe.'" There are so many situations and circumstances in our lives, sometimes uncontrollable situations, things that we have no control over, things that we may not have foreseen that occur. Things that befall not only ourselves physically or emotionally or psychologically, but things that befall those who are around us. And because of our affiliation, of our compassion for those who are around us, we are filled with discomfort, fear, dissatisfaction. We feel incapacitated. We feel unable to do anything. Today our story comes from the book of Mark chapter 5. It begins with two stories in actual fact. The story that we are going to share together today, and another story, a story of a woman who had an issue of blood for 12 years. That's a story for another time. But this story that we are going to share today is not about the man, but about someone who is attached to the man. The man is fearful. The man is discouraged. The man is downtrodden, but he is so not because of himself, but because of the fear that he has over what is happening to someone who is closely associated with him. Let's tell the story. In fact, the book of Mark chapter 5 is a chapter that is said to be a chapter of woes, a chapter of dreadful things that happen. But in the midst of those dreadful things, there always comes a glimmer of hope, a silver lining at the end of a stormy cloud, a bright light at the end of the tunnel. Thus saying, despite the terror that may encompass, there is always a glimmer of hope. What is that hope? Let's read the story, or let's hear what the story has to say. Mark chapter 5, beginning with verse 21, tells us that Jesus disembarks from a boat, and as soon as he disembarks, a crowd begins to gather around him. As always, people would always gather around Jesus. Some came because they needed miracles. Some came because it was an opportunity to be seen. Some came because they wanted to trap Jesus. They wanted to see what they could use against him. But this time there's a man. The Bible says a man named Jairus. It calls him by name. It tells us his position in society. The Bible here says that he was a ruler in the synagogue. The Bible reveals these things to us to put everything into perspective. But the Bible also tells us that he comes and he throws himself at the feet of Jesus and he cries to Jesus, praying, "Come and heal my daughter," because he is sick to the point of death. His daughter is sick to the point of death. He is terrified at the thought of losing his daughter. He is terrified at the pain that his daughter may be feeling. He is terrified at the fact that his young child is going through this process, and the only one he feels can save him now, the only one he feels can save his daughter now, is Jesus. Allow me to assume, I have two daughters of my own, allow me to assume that he had tried everything. He had been to every physician. He had tried every type of medication. He had tried every miracle worker he thought. He had tried the temple. He had tried the hospital. He had tried the healers, the traditional healers of the time, and none could help him. And then he remembered that there was a man that they as Jews had despised because of the things that he had done. He recalled that he had heard, perhaps he had seen the miracles that Jesus had done, the healings that Jesus had done, the wise words that Jesus had spoken. He had probably heard about. He goes and he casts himself at the feet of Jesus and beseeches Jesus, "Please come to my house. I know that if you come, my daughter will be healed. Come and lay your hand on her and make her well." Jesus then begins a journey to go to the house of Jairus. But here is the tragedy. While on the way to Jairus' house, the Bible tells us that a woman pierces her way through the crowd and touches the hem of the garment of Jesus, and immediately after 12 years of suffering is made whole. The power of Jesus heals a woman who did not even want to make herself known. Unlike Jairus, she had not stopped Jesus in his tracks so that she could beseech him to heal her. She knew that only if she could just touch the hem of his garment, she could be made well. And she had done so. Jesus stops, and a conversation then ensues between him and the disciples, and him and this woman. And while they are conversing, a message comes from the house of Jairus. A man comes from the house of Jairus, probably taps him on the shoulder and tells him, "Man, stop bothering Jesus. Your daughter is dead." One could almost imagine the terror that filled the heart of Jairus. One could almost imagine the pain that must have struck as though his heart might have been pierced with a spear or a knife. His daughter was dead. His spirits were shattered. His faith in Jesus was probably dashed. And while the conversation ensued between he and this messenger who came from his house, Jesus overheard. And then he comes and he speaks the words that we read in verse 36. And he says to him, "Do not be afraid. Fear ye not. Only believe. Fear not." Here is Jesus telling a man whose daughter has just died that he need not fear. Oh, what an irrational thing. I dare say to you today, friend, that fearlessness, that courage, that faith in God is irrational at times. Believing that God is able can sometimes land you in hot water, because your faith in him can be seen by others as the true irrationality, can be seen as foolishness. But listen to the story. Jairus listens to Jesus and his heart is girded. His faith is lifted. They begin again a journey to the house of Jairus, and when they arrive, the Bible tells us that everyone is chased away. There were people who were mourning and crying and weeping and wailing around the house. Inside of the house there was commotion because something terrible had happened. Inside the house there was mourning, there was weeping, and there was crying. Jairus' wife was there and she was crying. I read somewhere that in those days there were people who would always be waiting to see, waiting for an opportunity for someone to die so that they could go and render their services for wailing, so that everyone in the community could know that there was something that had happened, something tragic that had occurred in the house. I want to assume that this was not a foreign case here. Allow me to assume that the weepers and wailers had already rendered their services. They were present. They were crying, but they were not affected by the things that were happening. The pain that Jairus was feeling was not fueling their emotion, but filling their pockets. I want you to know, friend, that there are sometimes people who take advantage of our fearfulness. There are sometimes people who take advantage of our distress. And when we are distressed, they come and wail with us, but are not affected by our emotions. Jesus pushes them all out. He goes into the house with Peter, James, and John, and the wife of Jairus with Jairus himself. They go into the room where the child is sleeping, and Jesus leans over, touches the child, and calls her, "Talitha kumi," little girl, I say to you, arise. The Bible says immediately as Jesus spoke, life was then fueled back into the body of the child, and she awoke. Here is what I want us to learn today. In the midst of hopelessness, in the midst of the things that entrench us with fear, in the midst of the things that pull us down and sink us into hopelessness, there is always a glimmer of hope if we listen to the words of Jesus when he says to us, "Fear not, only believe." What do we believe in? We believe in the power of Jesus to heal. We believe in the power of Jesus to raise the dead. We believe in the power of Jesus to speak life into our lifeless situations. We believe in the power of Jesus to give us hope when we are hopeless. We believe in the power of Jesus to resurrect our defeated states. I want to say to you today that if you want to overcome your situation, if you want to be lifted out of your circumstances, if you want Jesus to calm your storm, if you want Jesus to be the solution to your situation, all you need to do is fear not, but only believe in him. I don't know what it is that is beclouding your life today. I don't know what pains you may be suffering through. I don't know what it is that may have entrenched you in hopelessness and fear, but I call upon you today. Believe in Jesus and his ability to save. He is able and he can salvage whatever situation that seems to be hopeless. Only believe in Jesus. Fear ye not.